Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to the continuation of my discussion of Trails of Cold Steel 2. If you haven't seen the previous part and or parts, because I still haven't edited it at the time of me recording this, so I don't know whether it's just going to be one large part, whether I'm going to break it up multiple parts, whatever the case may be. Previous part and or parts will be in the description down below, links to them, I should rather say. So let's jump into it once again. If for whatever reason you haven't seen part 1 or whatever, fact of the matter is I'm going into spoilers, so if you don't want anything spoiled for you, don't watch this. So really quickly, I checked my notes to see like some topics I wanted to cover. One of them ended up being, it's more of an in-game thing. It's not really a storyline thing, but it's just an accessory that I really liked into, and I think it's called the Ice Crown. It's basically that item you get from the secret shrine that you're able to go to. It's the one that's located in the Ymir Valley, that you can only get there like prior to you rescuing the royal family and Elise, because obviously once you go to rescue them, that's like your last chance to do, like, once you rescue them, you're stuck, you know, to the end of chapter 4 all the way through to the finale, like, so like you're kind of locked in at that point in time. But this is like one of those extra things you can do. I was actually going into this expecting it to be a full dungeon, and it ended up being not the case. It's literally a straight shot to what is one of the hardest boss fights in the game. It took me a couple tries to beat it. I mean, and once again, this is just me playing on normal mode. I'm not even really that interested in playing Nightmare mode. I said that weird. I'm curious. I might change that soon enough, but we'll kind of have to see in the long run, because I'm contemplating where I'm gonna finally just nut up and just like do a nightmare runs. But regardless of all the tangents and all that, it took me a couple tries to beat the boss. I did, like, my final shot was pretty good. Like, obviously it's like the whole thing of canceling, and the canceller obviously set up and everything really helped out in that. But also I think it's also a key factor to that is having uses with his technique. Was it platinum? I'm blanking on it. Platinum sword, I think is what it's called. The one where he puts up, makes you invulnerable. It has this, it's the same effect as the, was it adamantine shield, whatever the case may be. But I think I had a pretty smooth sailing run against that boss. I was able to kind of pretty much like delay it over and over and over again, because usually I don't just have one canceller. It's not just rain. I usually have multiple cancelers, especially because this was my second time through, because you can only do this particular dungeon your second time through. But I thought regardless of all that, I think I lucked out with everything. I had the right setup, plus I was super lucky. So one of my final attempt for the fight ended up going really smoothly. But the fact of the matter is, regardless, the whole reason why I'm bringing it up is that item is so damn good. To anyone that never got the item or doesn't know what I'm talking about, it's basically an accessory that basically recovers 15 CP crap points like every turn. And it's not like, oh, every time that character has a turn and it's, you know, it's their turn to get 15. It's like, no, every single turn, enemy turns, your allies turn. So say for example, it's like the enemy has a turn, then it's Sarah, then it's Machias, and I have it equipped on Laura, for example. Every turn, the enemy's turn, that's 15. Sarah's turn, that's 15. Machias' turn, that's 15. And then when it gets to Laura, that's another 15. You know, so like that, it's such a good. I always equipped it on Reen, because I end up burning through his CP more than anyone else's. But also when you stack that on top of the fact is, I mean, granted, because of his force master quartz, you know, especially when you level up more and more, the more when he kills enemies, the more CP recovers. So when you add all that together, it's that item is so damn good. But obviously I always equipped it on a ring, because I'm like, that item is so, it's one of my favorite items. Next to that will probably be like the Grail Locket, that being like that item. It's in all 3 games, you know, obviously the ones I've played, but it's like it makes you invulnerable to all abnormal statuses, like, so that's like all debuffs as well as any other status effects, like, you know, poison, seal, mute, like yada yada. It's actually kind of interesting, because I didn't notice until because it comes up from time to time, but I always forget that Reen, when he uses his spirit unification, isn't affected. Like basically his spirit unification form is basically like having a Grail Locket equipped. You're not affected by any status debuff. So it's just kind of an interesting thing to kind of think about. Next up, big thing to talk about is the whole Thomas thing. Now, I talked about this before in something else. I don't even remember what video I referenced it in. It might have even been in Trails. When I was talking about part 1, but regardless, it's the truth about Rosine and Thomas. It's actually kind of interesting, because I didn't get that reveal the first time, because like after I beat 2 for the first time, I immediately went to 3, and obviously if you know in 3, spoilers, you run into Rosine, and it's built off the aftermath of learning the truth about them. So I mean, granted, even in the confines of that, you still don't get the full context of that conversation. You get bits and pieces, but you don't get the full conversation that you get into when it gets revealed who they are. I like it because obviously it's slowly revealed that like Thomas isn't your normal, because obviously it comes up in one when Thomas was working with the other instructors to fight back the Soldats that are about to, you know, invade Trista. But it's like, because Marikov is kind of like, you with these, he's like, you've already worked out these things, weaknesses, haven't you? He's like, okay, maybe I have. Like, the fact of the matter is, Thomas right then and there is kind of like cleared it. Like, I mean, granted, everyone else at that school, whether it's Van Dyke, Beatrix, you know, obviously Neidhart and Sarah, then eventually, you know, Sharon showed up, but it was like, they're all like all-stars in their own right. But the fact of the matter is, it really comes into play like at the end where it's kind of going up against all those magic knights, and he kind of reveals more of himself. Plus, he was doing the whole secret thing, like running, because that is kind of interesting, like, why out of anyone, he is one of the only instructors. Neidhart, it makes sense because Neidhart wasn't at the, you know, he was at the academy, but also he's got his military connection, so it's not like he was out and about, because he was also like, I think, did they say he was on the, because you're dealing with everything in the east, they're dealing with everything in the west. I think he was in the west, and then he comes back. Obviously, when you go to rescue Fiona and everything, that being a really big, you know, plot point and everything, because I like that being an aspect of, obviously, you're like helping out everyone's family, because it's like family to someone in class 7 makes them extended family to us. So it's like when it's time to rescue Fiona, because it puts, you know, Olaf, their dad, in a compromised position, because he won't back down, because obviously he's worried about his daughter, but he's like, Fiona's stronger, don't underestimate her, we'll do whatever, like cowards that want to try and use her as leverage, that's on them. Like, obviously, you know, we're not going to falter. And obviously at the end of the day, Neidhart showed up, which I also love that it, like, this game shows, because I think they reference it in 1 maybe, but it definitely shines through in 2 that like Fiona and Neidhart, there's kind of something there. But regardless of it all, I kind of went on this large tangent. But obviously, like, circling back to it, finding out that Thomas is Potter, I'm going to butcher it because I've heard the name. They say the name because I haven't gotten to that point. I think I don't know if they've said it voice acting wise in 3 yet, where I'm at, because I'm in chapter 4. I'm about to head to Heimdall in 3, because obviously, you know, spoilers, you meet up with Thomas in chapter... in chapter 4, you run into Thomas and Heimdall, like, because he pops up in the story. Like, he doesn't pop up until the very end. The entire time Rosine's there. Once again, this is conversations about 3, but the Gralsritter, I think it's you know, because it's interesting, because like at the time, like, you learned that obviously the church isn't just what the way people, everyone's minds of what the church is and everything. Like, Reem's mind is open to it, because obviously he learns about it from Scarlet, that, oh, Scarlet actually was training to be a sister. So it's kind of actually interesting, the same training she went through is probably stuff that, like, Rosine kind of, well, Rosine's a little different, because it wasn't just training as a sister, she's training as a squire, but maybe eventually she could become one. Because it's actually interesting, because in the story of Carolina, the story, or Carnelia, the story that about Toval, like, Carnelia was dressed as a sister, which is also interesting because Angelica does the same thing, and that's why it correlated in my head that think that they were master and student. That was her master because of the whole, because you also dressed up like, you know, regardless, it's just interesting like how that ends up coming up. But the fact of the matter is, in the grand scheme of things, I just thought that was kind of an interesting, like, take on that, because for one, not only for Thomas, but even for Rosine, because it's like, oh, she had this secret that they don't really let on at all, that, you know, because I didn't even talk about it, because obviously this all ties into the Black Records, which obviously play a much bigger role in 3, but even then, like, a lot of the stuff that gets brought up in the Black Records, even just in 2, kind of seems like, especially with knowledge of 3, like, a lot of it acknowledges stuff that, like, because a lot of the stuff has to do with like Testarossa, so it's kind of like a lot of it's pertinent to 2, but obviously you get more into it in 3, because a lot of the stuff in the Black Records is way more pertinent in 3, because it's like a history repeating itself. Like, you need to learn from the past because it's all playing out the same way, which kind of makes sense in the grand scheme of things, because even VIDS says in the grand scheme of things of like, that basically this whole thing, this cycle of things happens every so often. It's just humanity ends up forgetting about it, just because there's some, obviously this once again plays into 3 even more, of that there being things behind the scenes, but like a lot of people end up forgetting a lot of the stuff. So like, that's why there aren't really many records aside from the Black Records that talk about the Divine Knights taking a part in the battle. Like, obviously they were just beings of legends, but it's like they took place in the war, just no one remembered, just because it's been like 250 years and everything, and just like over time people forget, you know, what You know, I mean, that's what they say kind of about a lot of legends, that they start in reality and they just fall into the background of fairy tales and stories, you know, because obviously like vampires and witches, for example, become things. Obviously vampires you don't really learn about too much until like obviously 3, but even they set that up in the Red Moon Rose books in 1, because she's fighting vampires, roses, as well as home dude, I'm blanking on his name, the soldier that she works with, she reluctantly works with in 1. But obviously it's also because like, well, they don't reveal to it till the very end, near the end of the book, that she herself is actually a vampire as well, which obviously plays true, because you know, once you get introduced to the real Rose and everything, it all kind of makes sense in the grand scheme. Because I was reading that the entire time, because by the time I actually read the books, I'd already played 3, so I was like, huh, so I guess she's just not a vampire. And then it gets revealed, oh, she's a vampire, she just denied that side of herself or something. Once again, much like the books about Toby, the Rose books are kind of like their own thing. They're not like, I mean, obviously it's like, you know, someone spinning their own take on this story or whatever. There's some truth to it, but obviously a lot of it's just made up stuff. Once again, I haven't played 4, but this whole thing does make me wonder, will we get to meet other members of the Girl Shredder like much later on in the story, or is Thomas and Rosine the only ones? It's actually kind of interesting because it actually plays a little bit into Gaius' story in more ways than 1. Because obviously, I'll allocate it just to 2 stuff. I won't go into anything with 3. But the fact of the matter is, with Gaius, like one of the quests in the game is the one where you're actually tracking down that priest, and it's actually interesting because I had actually looked this up, like, and it, you know, it's there that if you bring Sarah and Gaius at the end of this quest, like they'll have the dialogue for them will be a little bit different. Like Sarah has some idea about who the priest is that you're tracking down. Like it's like, oh, she's aware of him. Gaius knows him because he's the priest that came to Nord every once in a while. He's the one that kind of inspired and taught, you know, Gaius, you know, and everything. So, you know, in the grand scheme of things, I'm thinking about, I didn't talk about it at all, but obviously I like how the games do a very interesting thing where it's like, obviously you're revisiting a lot of the same areas from the first game, but you're just going to new areas within those areas. Like, so for Nord, you go to where the shrine, whichever shrine it is that's there, obviously you revisit like the ancient quarry and stuff like that, but like you go to some places that you couldn't access before. I mean, obviously, because like there's also one place in Nord I think is interesting. It's like, oh, this road leads to Calvert, and I'm like, and seeing that again, I'm like, is that going to turn up? Is that going to be a thing in 4? You think it probably would, because that Calvert plays a bigger. And once again, that's kind of a whole thing, which makes me even wonder: is like, are there going to be any future like Trails of games that, or rather Legend of Hero games in general that take place in Calvert? Or will they just, I mean, because obviously, well, I mean, because even look at all of this, like, this is all the Erebonian arc, but obviously the other games take place in it. So, like, obviously the Trails in the Sky games take place in Liberl. The Trails 2, you know, Zero and Azure take place in Crossbell. These 4, the Trails of Coast Steel take place in Erebonia. There could always be other games that take place in Calvert, because obviously you have, like, once again, the Gambling Jack books that they are about characters that take place in Calvert. So you even meet like NPCs. It comes up in 3. There's definitely an NPC. Oh, there's plenty of NPCs in 3 that definitely are from Calvert, because that's a whole thing. But regardless, tangents, I'm getting like all over the place, so I do apologize. Really quickly, I want to talk about a quest I almost like let slip my mind. It's the one from Elisa, where you basically, I think it's one of the last quests you can kind of do in the game, and I think it's one of the last ones before everything kind of, you know, before, like I said, around that same lane of like that special shrine you could go to and everything, like before you get to like near like being locked into the end game stuff. I think it's basically her mom gave Jackass a watch to fix it, but she was basically like, if you can't fix it, you can't fix it. And Elisa kind of gets upset by it. She's like, you know what, I'm gonna fix it. I'm gonna, you know, just kind of prove her mom wrong. And it turns out the pocket watch was like a picture of her mom. Like, I think it was like her mom and her dad, or maybe just a picture of her and her dad, whatever the case may be. I can't remember exactly, but obviously you give it to her, and once again, Irina can be a little cold and everything. She's not very good at showing her feelings. I think it's truth be told is everything related to her husband made her, because even Elisa talks about the fact that ever since her mom died, I mean, ever since her dad died, her mom changed, you know? So it's a little into that, so she just kind of acts like it's no big deal. But more so than anything, when she gets on the elevator, it's like, huh, I guess Elisa never found out about this. And if you turn it the opposite way, it opens up to a picture of Irina holding like a baby Elisa. So it's just kind of like, you know, it's like she's like, it's nice to take some time out, you know, away from her busy schedule to kind of look at it from time to time, you know, to kind of reminisce a little bit. So it's like, regardless of how Elisa feels, like her mom always does love her. She doesn't always show it the best way, but she loves her, and that you are always on her mind, that, you know, that you are something that she keeps that watch around, because I think for her it's like, even if it doesn't work, it's fine, as long as, because I can't remember if this is a bonding event from 1 or 2, that basically Elisa's cleaning out her like mom's office or whatever. It might be 2. I believe it. Yeah, it definitely is 2. I'm stupid. It's definitely 2, where Elisa's cleaning out her mom's office, and then she pulls out like a picture where, like, in her mom's office it's like, it's a picture of their family. So it's like your mom always has it nearby, so she can always look at whenever she needs it. So it's like they're always on her mind, whether she kind of keeps herself busy and focused, but it's like, you know. So, and once again, that's always just an interesting relationship Elisa has with her mom. But I thought that was kind of a beautiful quest in its own right, and just kind of showing you that side of Marina, that softer side that you wouldn't think is there, even though it's like, yeah, like I said, she doesn't always show it, but she does love her daughter a lot. It's actually kind of interesting, speaking of Elisa and bonding events, I think once again it's kind of like that Berea Heart, like, oh, like these are like the final bonding events for everyone, technically, to a certain extent, excluding the final bonding events you need for like the trophies and stuff like that. When you're Berea Hard, there's this very interesting thing where Elisa wants to go inside of Valimar, and I think that's such an interesting thing, because obviously it's this cute, adorable moment between them and everything, but also it's just kind of like, that's a one-off thing that no one else, other than Celine being with Marina, no one else is ever inside of Valimar. To be fair, it's only, you know, small enough for one person and a familiar, not 2 people, so there's just not enough room around. But I think it's so interesting, because the whole conversation about like, oh, this is what you see, and she's like, oh, it's a little isolating. But obviously for Marina, it's like, even if I'm on the inside fighting by myself, I know I'm not alone, because I've got all of you out there supporting me. Because that also ties into the whole aspect of, obviously, once again, because mech battles get more, obviously, like, you got introduced to it a little bit at the end of 1, and obviously it becomes elevated more and more throughout 2. But obviously you having the rest of class 7 be your backup during those fights and everything, and how, you know, even Sarah gets counted, because even though she's your instructor, she is just as much a part of class 7 as anyone else, you know, because that was always a thing for Milliam. She feeling like, oh, I just joined the class, but it's like, no, you're just, even though your reasons for joining might have just been different throughout it all of our experiences together, you are just as much a part of class 7 as any one of us, you know. So I think that's just kind of a beautiful aspect, and once again, that's kind of represented by the fact is them all being secondary contractors. And I talked about this before, I think it's so interesting that they are, would Crow technically count as one, because he was there too, and obviously he has a special connection, and that's something I'm wondering, will that technically come up later on, because obviously it comes up during the Infernal Castle, obviously them fighting in unison and together and everything, but part of me wonders, like, is that something that might pop up in 4, like him being like, wait, Crow, you know, that's kind of spoilers and everything. I let us spoiler stuff, I'm sorry. Regardless, changes and all that. Let's quickly change the subject. I just thought that whole Elisa thing was like very like sweet and everything. So, but also, since I did bring up the whole Celine thing, I think it is kind of, it's sad and kind of neat that Celine being your co-pilot at the very end of 1, but obviously every mech battle in 2, she's there by your side. It's just sad that like you don't have that opportunity in 3. Once again, little spoilers for 3, but Celine's only with you for 1 mech fight in the entire game. So it's, you know, even she's like, oh, it's kind of like old times, like, because obviously Green kind of does it by himself. Like, you know, obviously at the end, like everything after the finale, and obviously like you don't get to play it, but everything that kind of takes place during the events of the epilogue and everything, like Reen's kind of having to do the whole being in Valimar by himself, because obviously Celine's with Emma, so obviously that's even truer for like the time skip in between 2 and 3, but we'll kind of, you know, get there eventually. I also wrote in my notes to remind myself I got to talk about the Anton and Ricky storyline, which I think is kind of interesting. I love that that's like, once again, the whole thing of like random NPCs becoming like background stories that you get invested in and stuff like that. For example, like you meet Anton and Ricky when you go to Berea Heart for your field study. Basically, Anton got lost along the way. Like he was chasing after a butterfly, and then he ran into the monster. She ran the other way, and he kind of got stuck at like Auroch's base. So they were like, you offer to take him back, because obviously he's on this trip because he's actually from Liberl, which makes me wonder if could you run into his character in the trails of, there's a character I came across like I just was randomly watching some stuff about trails in the sky, and I saw a character model that kind of looked like his. I don't know whether it's just supposed to be like a generic character model. It had a different name, but I was like, is that supposed to be Anton? Like, that's why I was curious, because he's from Leburo, and obviously like the character he was talking to was a lady, and I was like, is that, because obviously he references the fact that he walked away from a broken heart. Obviously he's on his journey to live it up and just, you know, find love and everything. But regardless, like you run into them there. The next time you run into them in 1 is in Trista, and obviously that's where he falls for Sharon, and that becomes a thing, because obviously it's like, oh, Sharon was so nice to him and stuff like that. She gave him, and like you learn more about the backstory in 2, that particular reference. But obviously like when you go there at the end of 1, like during Trista, during the summer event, like the fact of the matter is Sharon's in the kitchen and Ricky and Anton are at a nearby table, and Anton's looking at, you know, Sharon do work and stuff like that. Regardless, the whole point is, I want to circle back to, it's like you run into Anton in a couple different places, and the entire time like you don't have too many conversations with him. You're mainly just listening to him, and like obviously like he's looking for Ricky. Obviously there's a quest connected to it in the ground, the proving grounds, because he'd gone off to Corellia Fortress because he was trying to find, you know, Ricky, and you kind of drag him back, and one of the military dudes is grilling him because he's like, is he aspiring anything? And the party's like, well, yeah, we would help you out, but you kind of deserve this for kind of going off on your own as a civilian. But like I said, you run into him from time to time. I missed this stuff. Well, it's actually interesting because you can actually get even more to this in a side quest when you pick up, was it, I want to say it's Loggins, or is it Klein? I can't remember. I think it's Loggins, if I remember correctly. It might have been Klein. And Hebel, like they're during this like aircraft hijacking like side quest is connected to Jaegers and stuff like that. One of the said people on the ship that was passengers is Ricky. And what's interesting is like Anton's like, oh, Ricky, we're reunited and everything. But Ricky's like, I don't know who you are. He has amnesia. And so the first time through, because there's this quest in the epilogue where you meet up with Anton and Ricky, and obviously Anton wants your help getting close to Sharon and everything. And so it's actually a really adorable thing. Obviously, especially it's so interesting depending on who you have with you, especially because you have Elisa and even Sarah commenting on being like, because Sarah's like, really? That's not a route you want to go down, dude, basically type of thing. So I like them adding their own commentary to it, but it's just like him being someone that's just like, obviously the whole thing was about getting her number, but then he professes his love to Sharon, and it didn't go out the way he thought it would, but he wasn't as devastated as he was before because he was able to do something to accomplish it, and Ricky's there to compliment him. The thing is, by that point, Ricky already has his memories back and everything. He kind of references the fact that he lost his memory and stuff like that, so I never saw that in between until my second time through. It's like later, at one point, I want to say it's before everything goes down, you have to go back to Rower one more time, and you get to, you know, before you get, like I say, get locked into saving like the royal family and everything, before you get to that point when you're go back to Roar one more time, you talk to them, and then Ricky gets his memories back. So it's like I said, it's like a little side thing that you would, if like I said, I completely missed him getting his memories back during 1, because like I said, it just, you know, but I love being able to get that context of him remembering Anton, and Anton being so happy to have his best friend back and everything. I just thought that was kind of really neat, you know, and everything. So it's just like a little interesting, super small subplot in the game that I thought was just kind of pretty neat. What I thought was kind of an interesting thing about Emma's progression throughout the story, because obviously a lot of her bonding events kind of deal with this a little bit, is her kind of feeling a little inferior to Vita, because everything like Vita is able to do, she feels like, oh, I'm not, you know, it's because even it comes up when you're getting the Zamarian ore, and in the final shrine to get the ore, you run into Vita, you end up fighting Grianos. But obviously Vita's talking about the fact is like, oh, you don't really know everything, Emma, like, oh, grandmother, the elder, she wanted to protect you, so she didn't tell you a lot of stuff that like, oh, I know this, so you're just kind of a fledgling witch, and she's saying all this stuff. But Emma kind of, you know, it's like, yes, but the fact of the matter is she's not the same person that she was. Obviously she's grown, because everyone wants her to, you know, because from the beginning, like, you know, when you meet up with her in Legram, she feels like, oh, I should leave, you know, because I kept this from you guys and everything, I didn't do, it's like, no, the fact of, and it's something Reem brings up to her, I think in 3, but I think it's also there in 2 as well. It's like, we don't just keep you around because you're a witch and how helpful you can be to us. It's like, you're our class president. You're there for us as Emma, not Emma the witch, just as Emma. You being you is why you're here. Like, you're just as much a part of class 7, not because you're a witch, just because you're you, you know? So I just thought that was just kind of an interesting trajectory for her story, because it's interesting because Laura kind of has a little bit of inverse, because like Duvalie, like especially in the Infernal Castle, is talking mad shit, but then Laura is like, no, she's steadfast, and it's like, no matter what, I look at this as an opportunity to test my mettle against you, and you know, my own skills against my ancestors and stuff like that. So obviously Duvalie didn't get to like break her as much as she thought, and literally everyone else's comments is like, yeah, that's Laura for you, because I think that's exactly what Fee says. But nevertheless, it's just kind of an interesting like comparison a little bit kind of in my head between like, you know, but once again, it's a whole thing about like everyone kind of having their growth over the course of the series. So I was just thinking about it. This is something I still haven't looked into, but I'm not sure. I feel like I'm right about this, but I could be wrong. I feel like when it came to Elisa getting close to any character, because obviously, like, once again, I've only done like a limited amount of like bonding events, because I've done them a little differently each game. Like I said, in the first game, I did Elisa the first time through. No surprise. I've talked about it. I made it clear. The character they kind of push you towards, I kind of typically go that way during, you know, whether it's an anime or a TV show or anime or whatever, like whatever characters are kind of pushing towards again, that's the ones I kind of lean in to be my quote-unquote #1 waifu, is that type of situation. But the fact of the matter is, like, the second time through in the first one, I chose to not dance with anyone and just be with Elise. For the second game, obviously the first time through I did Elise, the second time through, not Elise, but the first time through I did Elisa, and the second time through I did Princess Alphen actually. And so the whole point was, I thought was kind of interesting, it's like Reen and Elisa actually kiss like at the end, like when you're like during the final bonding event, the one thing that you like, the one that actually triggers the trophy you can get and everything. I'm not sure if he does that with any other girl, because the same thing comes up in 3. Spoilers, I'm sorry, but the fact of the matter is, it actually gives you an option of whether you want to just be friends with Elisa. Obviously I didn't choose that. There's like the other option just to kiss and be more, because obviously they are more, whether the story really goes down that route, but obviously like their dynamic and just like what they have, it lends itself to kind of will they won't they type of situation, you know. That is obviously, it's a lot more ingrained in the story that way between these two characters than it is anyone else, you know. But the fact of the matter is, I don't think he has that with any other character. He definitely doesn't have it from the ending things I've done in 3, because I've only done like a handful of them in 3. Like I've done, like I said, I won't get into it, but I haven't done too many. But like the ones I have done, that hasn't really presented itself like that. Especially because one of them is Toa's, and that didn't come up. It only came up in Elisa's. But maybe if I do the others, because I hadn't done the OG Class 7, like all the ladies at OG Class 7, so I don't know if that will be the case or not. But definitely with Elisa's, it presented the opportunity, but maybe you get that opportunity with all the other ladies as well. But like definitely in 2, I feel like you get close to them, but I don't know if you do the whole kissing and making out thing. Like I think that's specifically a Reen and Elisa thing. Once again, I could be mistaken. I just once again, I haven't gone down that route of kind of doing that with any other characters. I don't know. But like I said, because I saw someone who obviously their #1 is Emma. I don't know if I remember seeing that. Like I said, could be mistaken. Hello, you wonderful people. Really quickly want to interrupt this by letting you know, obviously, much like before, this discussion session ended up going a lot longer than I thought it would. So rather than having this be a large chunk, I'm dividing this up again like I did the previous part. So I'm ending this part of the discussion here, but obviously you'll get the next part of this discussion soon enough. So just wanted to inform you about that, you know. So to the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.